How are you guys doing? Today is Saturday, April 10th, 2021, out here in this quarantine. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to do an individual profile on Corey Kluber, the newest starting pitcher for the New York Yankees. Today, he turns 35, and he's put together a long and illustrious career. With this episode, I plan on pointing out the achievements and the stats and the accolades that he's been able to amass over his entire career to show how he stands out from other starting pitchers, and for that matter, other players that have ever that are currently playing in the MLB and have ever played over time. So if you've never seen Corey Kluber, his nickname is literally the Klubot. When he's at his best, he's it's really hard to hit off of him, and he's definitely a player that when he's on his game, he's definitely going to throw the pitch that you will not expect. He has 3, 4, 5 amazing pitches, and I mean, it's a matter of time before he achieves some success with the Yankees. But looking out, just to give a little bit of background, he's originally from Birmingham, Alabama. He went to go play high school baseball in Texas, and then after playing at Stetson University, he was named the Atlantic Sun Conference Pitcher of the Year in 2007. He was initially taken by the San Diego Padres in the 4th round of 2007. And after being traded to Cleveland, being traded to the Cleveland system, he would eventually be brought up through the Cleveland Indians, or he would eventually get brought up to become a professional major leaguer on the Indians in 2011 in his age 25 season. And looking out to how he's doing as of right now, starting off with his first season, he would only pitch 4.1 innings in 3 games that he played in relief. He would allow 4 earned runs in those 4.1 innings pitched, allowing 6 hits and striking out only 5 batters. This is a season where the Cleveland Indians finished 80-82 with the second best record in the AL Central, and of course not doing much. You wouldn't really expect from him in that first season. I don't even think he qualified for a rookie that season. In his rookie season with Cleveland in 2012, he would end up playing 12 games, starting 12 of them. He would finish with a 2-5 record in a season where the Cleveland Indians would finish with a 68-94 record with 12 less wins in the previous season. They had the 4th best record in the AL Central. In his rookie season, Corey Kluber would pitch 63 innings in those 12 games. He would finish with a 5.14 ERA. He would allow 76 hits in those 63 innings as he struck out 54. Still not exactly the all-star player that many people were expecting yet, but of course he would get better. And considering he was still in his mid-20s, he hadn't found his way yet. And in 2013, in his age 27 year, is when you start to see the shift of him turning into probably one of the better pitchers you'll see. In 2013, he started 24 of the 26 games that he played in a season where the Indians finished second in the AL Central but still made the playoffs. They finished with 92 wins and 70 losses, 24 wins in the previous season as Terry Francona was named the manager of the year. Kluber would finish with an 11-5 record as he finished with a 3.85 ERA. In the 147 innings that he pitched, he allowed 153 hits, which is more hits than innings pitched. Of course, the stat that I continue to look at, and he also struck out 136 batters, which is less strikeouts than innings pitched. But at this point, he was starting to become a respectable starting pitcher, but not yet. He was becoming a respectable one, but not yet fully respected. In 2014, of course, all of that would change. In his age 28 season, Kluber would start 34 games, leading the American League for the only time in his career. In a season where the Cleveland Indians finished with an 85-77 record, they finished with the 3rd best record in the AL Central, 7 less wins than the year before, but of course, Kluber would have the season of his career at that point. He would finish with 18 wins and 9 losses. That's, of course, the first time in his career he'd win 18 games in a season. He would finish with a 2.44 ERA as he threw 3 complete games. The first time he threw a complete game in his career, and he threw 235 innings. The first time he threw over 200 innings in his career, he would allow 207 hits. The first time he had less hits than innings pitched, and he struck out 269 batters. The first time he struck out more batters than innings pitched, and he virtually doubled his strikeout numbers from what he did in 2013. And with this, even though he would not be named an All-Star in 2014, he was named the Cy Young winner in the American League, which is a very tough feat to do. And considering the Indians did not even make the playoffs, just shows, it kind of points out how impressive the season was even more. But even though they wouldn't make the playoffs, of course, this would transition into his 2015 season, his age 29 season. He would start 32 games in a season where the Indians would finish with an 81-80 record, third best record in the AL Central, as they had 4 less wins than the previous season. In the season for Kluber, he would finish with a 9-16 record. He led the American League in losses for the first time in his career, for the only time in his career, and this is the only time in his career where he finished with a double-digit amount of losses, like total. He led the league with 4 complete games thrown. In the 222 innings that he pitched, he allowed 189 hits, still less hits than innings pitched, and he struck out 245 batters. He was not named an All-Star, but he still finished top 10 in Cy Young voting. Whereas up until 2006, even though he had won a Cy Young award, he still hadn't won an All-Star, which was, of course, they had to point something out in that. But of course, all that would change. In 2016, he would start all 32 games in a season where the Indians would finish with the best record in the AL Central, the first time they had won the division since he had been there, and this would be the second time they made the playoffs. Terry Francona was named the manager of the year yet again. And in this year, Corey Kluber would finish with an 18-9 record for the second time in his career. He'd finish with a 3.14 ERA over the 215 innings that he pitched. He finished with 3 complete games, which is 10 over that 3-year span. He finished with 2 shutouts, leading the American League. In those 215 innings, he would allow 170 hits, which is significant, which is about 45 less hits than innings played. And then he struck out 227 batters, which is 12 more strikeouts than innings played as well. This season, he would finish 3rd in Cy Young voting, and I believe the season where Rick Porcello from the Boston Red Sox won it. But he would still be named an All-Star for the very first time in his career in 2016. Of course, the road was leading for them to do so. And as their ace, he would lead them to the ALDS, where they would sweep the Red Sox 3-0, beating Rick Porcello, the eventual winner of the Cy Young. They had to beat the Blue Jays in the ALCS when the Blue Jays were one of the top teams in all of baseball. They were the top hitting team. They were one of the top hitting teams in all of baseball. And then they would go on to the World Series and lose to the Chicago Cubs in the series where the Chicago Cubs ended their World Series drought of over 100 years. They would lose this series in 7, but of course Corey Kluber would be a big part of the reasons that the Indians got there in the first place as their first time All-Star. This would be the closest that he has ever come to the World Series in his career. But this would transition into his 2017 season, where he came back for Cleveland and he put up his second All-Star appearance in a row. He would go on to win his second Cy Young as well in what would be his 5th season starting as a full-time starter for the Cleveland Indians. He would start all 29 games he would play in a season where the Indians finished with a 102-60 record. They had 8 more wins than the previous season, in which they actually made it to the World Series. In this season, Corey Kluber would lead the American League in wins for the second time in his career. He finished 18-4. He had 18 wins for the 3rd time in his career. He would lead the American League in win-loss percentage. He won 81% of his games. And then he would finish with a 2.25 ERA, which is the best ERA in the American League. So that's 2 of the Triple Crown. The only thing that he was missing out on was strikeouts. And in strikeouts, he would finish. And looking at how his numbers fared this season, because I think this was probably his best pitching season, he would finish with 5 complete games, leading the American League for the second time in his career, and that's the most complete games he's ever pitched in his career. He finished with 3 shutouts, the most shutouts he's ever pitched in his career, and of course, he led the American League. That's another stat in which he led them in. He would pitch 203 innings, which, since his first Cy Young season, that's the least amount of innings that he's pitched. But he would allow 141 hits in those 203 innings, which is a difference of about 60 innings. About 60 innings pitched, and he would strike out 265 batters in those 203 innings, with a difference of about 60 there. Considering he would strike out 120 more batters than he had hits, would kind of say something. He would lead the league in ERA plus and walk/hits per innings pitched. He allowed only 1.6 walks per 9 innings. He would finish with only 36 walks in those 203 innings. And alongside this, he was voted the highest in the MVP race that he would ever get voted. He was voted 7th. He would be named an All-Star for the second year in a row, and of course he was named the Cy Young for the second time in his career, showing of course that the first Cy Young isn't a fluke, and the fact that you are being named the best player at your position multiple times should be, I think right then that should point out that you of course stand out from other players in the league that play your position. But once they made it into the playoffs with their 100-win season, they would lose in the ALDS to the Yankees in 5. When the Yankees, or this was the season where the Astros would go on and win the World Series and beat the Dodgers. This would transition into 2018, which was the last full season that Corey Kluber actually played. He would start all 33 of the games he would play for a Cleveland Indians team that would finish with a 91-71 record. That was the third season in a year in which they had won the American League Central. Of course, they made it to the playoffs for the 4th time since he had been there. In that season, he finished with a 20-7 record. That's the most wins that he'd ever put up in a season. But of course, he didn't lead the American League in wins this season. But he would finish with a 2.89 ERA. This would be the 3rd time as a starting pitcher he's had a sub-3 ERA. He led the American League in complete games. He had 2 of them this year. That's the 3rd time he's led the league in complete games. This is the 3rd time he led the league in shutouts, as he had only 1 of them. He led the American League in innings pitched too, as he pitched 215 innings, the first time in his career in which he had done so, even though it's probably the 3rd most amount of innings that he's ever pitched in his career. He would allow 179 hits in those 215 innings pitched, which would be the 5th year in a row in which he allowed less hits than the innings that he's pitched. He also struck out 222 batters, striking out more batters in innings pitched for the 5th year in a row. With this, like I said, he was named an All-Star for the 3rd year in a row. He would finish 3rd in Cy Young voting in the season where Blake Snell would end up winning that, because that's when Blake Snell won 1 more game than Corey Kluber. So Blake Snell took that award. And once they made it into the playoffs in their last season, they would end up losing to the Astros in the ALDS. Like, they got swept. And that was the last time that the Indians have made the playoffs since Corey Kluber has been on the team. Following that season, he would only play 7 games in 2019. In 2019, he would end up fracturing his right arm because he got hit by a line drive, and that would kind of really be the end of his stint in Cleveland. In those 7 games that he played, he only pitched 37 innings, allowing 47 hits and striking out 38 batters. So, of course, not a big sample size. He finished with a 2-3 record in a season where the Cleveland Indians finished with a 93-69 record. They had the 2nd best record in the AL Central, but they missed the playoffs completely. But, of course, following this season, Corey Kluber would eventually get picked up by the Texas Rangers. He was actually traded for cash, or he was traded for a couple of players, and his stint in Texas would not be completely expected. Of course, looking out to how that season played out in 2020, of course, if you're familiar, the coronavirus, of course, impacted the season in many ways, one of them being the fact that it shortened the season by 100 games. And so in this, of course, each team had to play 60 games, and of course, they had to do a lot of this traveling and a lot of stuff to avoid COVID. But for Corey Kluber, he would only pitch 1 inning, as he ended up leaving with shoulder tightness. But then he was officially diagnosed with a torn teres major muscle, putting him on the IL for the entire year. So for the Texas Rangers in 2020, he would only pitch 1 inning. He would not allow a single hit. He only struck out 1 batter and walked 1. And with this, he would, not much would happen, but this is also a season where the Rangers would completely miss the playoffs. They had the worst record in the AL West. But the fact that Corey Kluber did play an inning, like he technically has Texas on his resume because he did play for them before he got hurt. And then last but not least, he was officially, or looking into where he is right now, coming into this 2021 season. In January, he signed a 1-year, $11 million contract with the New York Yankees to, of course, be in the same lineup as Garrett Cole. Just looking at how the New York Yankees starting lineup looks. Thus far for the Yankees, Corey Kluber has only played 2 games thus far. He has an 0-1 record as he has a 5.68 ERA. He's played 6.1 innings, allowing 10 runs and striking out 8 batters in those 6 innings. His most recent game, he ended up losing to the Rays yesterday. And of course, in that specific matchup, Corey Kluber would allow 3 earned runs in 2.1 innings pitched as he struck out 3 batters, as he's now 0-1 on the season for the New York Yankees. I mean, it's tough for him to really get started. The last full season that he did officially play was it was years ago. It was back when the Indians made the playoffs in 2018. But with that said, looking at the hot streak that Corey Kluber's been on, the fact that he's one of few people in the world that can actually say he has multiple Cy Youngs. And you add all that together, I totally think that Corey Kluber is a pitcher that stands out from others. And with that said, I want to thank everyone for listening to all 16 minutes of this piece. I want to wish Corey Kluber a happy 35th birthday, and if you ever get a chance to watch him, he's one of the starting pitchers for the Yankees. He wears number 28, and if you're familiar with how starting pitching rotations work, he'll pitch once every 5 games. So if I were to guess, he'd probably pitch, if not Wednesday, then Thursday, or if not Tuesday, then Wednesday for the New York Yankees. But with that said, once again, I want to thank everyone for listening to my piece. Once again, today is Saturday, April 10th, 2021, out here in this quarantine. I want to thank everyone for listening to my piece. I want to wish Corey Kluber a happy 35th birthday, and I will catch you tomorrow with a daily episode once all of today's exhibitions are finished. Thanks once again for listening to my piece. I hope all is well, and I'll catch you tomorrow. Peace out.